So an organization's structure develops when managers first assign work tasks and activities to specific individuals or groups, and then it continues to develop when managers coordinate these diverse activities required to reach the firm's objectives. I like a lot the editorial cartoons, so please take a minute to read this cartoon because they provide some kind of insight. So when we talk about organizational structure, it's very common that we talk about an organizational chart. An organizational chart is a visual display of organizational structure, chain of command, and other relationships, like this example here. We see the president on the top. We see directors, vice presidents, and we see a direct relationship, and we see some kind of more parallel relationships. The best way to begin to understand how organizational structure develops is to consider the evolution of a new business, such as a clothing store. At first, the business is a sole proprietorship in which the owner does everything. She buys, prices, and displays the merchandise, does the accounting and task records, and assists customers. But as the business grows, the owner hires a salesperson and perhaps a merchandise buyer to help run the stores. And as the business continues to grow, the owner hires more sales personnel. The growth and success of the business now requires for her to be away from the store frequently, meeting suppliers, engaging in business relationships, and, for instance, attending trade shows. Thus, the owner must designate someone to manage the salespeople and maintain the accounting, payroll, and tax functions. If the owner decides to expand even more to other stores, they will need to hire more people. This figure here shows three different organizational charts in three different phases of this business. There are 5 major considerations to understand organizational structure in organizations, and these 5 major considerations start with job design or a specification of the content of the different activities organized in the organization. The second one is departmentalization or the subdivision into specific units. The third one is delegation and assigning responsibility. This is related to centralization and decentralization in the organization. The fourth one is what is related with span of management, or how many subordinates answer to a specific manager. And finally, chain of command, or the line of authority. So I came across these graphs last year, and even though these pictures do not reflect totally the real structure of these organizations, these figures do show some insight about how these organizations coordinate labor and somehow the culture of these organizations as well. So we have, for instance, Apple being very centralized, especially when Steve Jobs was around. Amazon has also a strong leader figure with the CEO, but it has 2 big structures or 2 big subdivisions. One, the retailing, and the other one, their cloud computing. Google has these 2 founder figures, and it had a third person, also very important, but Google has restructured it into what is called Alphabet. And Microsoft was commonly known as being very competitive culture, and now the new CEO has managed to sort of change that vision in Microsoft. This is just to mention few of these companies. After identifying all activities that must be accomplished, managers can break down these activities into specific tasks that can be accomplished by individual workers. For instance, framing, siding, painting, inspecting, and shipping. This division of labor into a small specific task and the assignment of employees to do single tasks is called a specialization. The rationale for specialization is efficiency, because people can perform more efficiently if they master just one task versus all tasks. Specialization also means that employees do not waste time from one job to another, and training is easier. Specialization also occurs when the activities that must be performed within an organization are too numerous for one person to handle. However, there are also negative consequences. People get bored and dissatisfied with their jobs, which could result in their unhappiness and also, for instance, poor quality of work, more injuries, and high employee turnover. Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, revolutionized manufacturing when he created what is called assembly lines, like this one, to specialize the tasks his workers needed to perform. Nowadays, modern companies have created different alternatives to specialization to account for its negative consequences. After assigning specialized tasks to individuals, managers next organize these people into similar groups to make them easier to manage. This is departmentalization, which refers to grouping of jobs into working units, usually called departments, units, groups, or divisions. In the context of media, this could be departments such as reporting, designing, TV interviews, and so on. As we will see, departments are commonly organized by function, product, geographic region, or customers. Most companies use more than one departmentalization plan to enhance productivity. For instance, fashion companies have departments such as men's clothing, women's clothing, children's clothing, and also have departments dealing with different functions and geography. Functional departmentalization groups jobs that perform similar functional activities such as marketing, finance, manufacturing, human resources, and information technology. This approach is common in small organizations. A weakness, though, is that because it tends to emphasize departmental units rather than organization as a whole, decision-making that involves more than one unit might be slow and it requires greater coordination. On the other hand, departmentalization by product organizes jobs around the products of the firm. In this case, we have one department, the educational toys, the other department, the girls' toys, the other department, boys' toys, and so on. Here, functional activities such as production, finance, marketing, and so on are located within each product division. Therefore, organizing by products tends to duplicate functions and resources and emphasizes the product rather than achievement of the organization's overall objectives. However, it simplifies decision-making and helps coordinate all activities related to a product or group product. The last two departmentalizations forms are geographic and customer departmentalization. In the geographic departmentalization, groups are done according to the geographic region. It could be a state, region, or continent. You can imagine that multinational corporations often use a geographical approach because, among other things, there are different differences in the regions in which these companies operate. One of the weaknesses, however, is that it requires a large administrative staff to control and coordinate the task among the different regions, and therefore also tasks can be duplicated between different regions. Finally, customer or client-based departmentalization arranges jobs around the needs of various types of customers. Here also, as in the case of geographic departmentalization, customer departmentalization does not focus on the organization as a whole, and therefore it might require a lot of administrative staff to coordinate and control the operations of these various groups. Another important topic in the organizational structure is delegation. Delegation and the level of centralization in an organization are related. Delegation of authority means not only giving tasks to employees but also empowering them to make commitments, use resources, and take whatever actions are necessary to carry out those tasks. As business grows, so do the number of complex decisions that must be made. So you can imagine that no single manager can carry out all the activities in the organization. Delegation of authority therefore frees a manager to concentrate on larger issues such as planning or dealing with problems and opportunities. Delegation gives responsibility or obligation to employees to carry out assigned tasks satisfactorily and holds them accountable for the proper execution of their work. Here, accountability means that employees who accept an assignment and the authority to carry out are answerable to a superior for their outcome. The extent to which authority is delegated through an organization determines its degree of centralization. In a centralized organization, authority is concentrated at the top or here at the center, and very little decision-making authority is delegated to lower levels. Although decision-making authority is centralized in the top or in the center, still a vast amount of responsibility for carrying out daily and routine procedures is delegated to even the lowest levels of the organization. Over-centralization can cause serious problems for a company, in part because over-centralization might create longer periods of time for the organization to make decisions. A decentralized organization is one in which decision-making authority is delegated as far down the chain of command as possible. Decentralization is characteristic of organizations that operate in complex and unpredictable environments. One of the disadvantages in decentralization is that decentralization organizations need a lot of talented people. The people need to have strong decision-making skills. Another key question in organizational structure is the span of management. Here the key question is how many subordinates should a manager manage? Of course, there is no simple answer, but the span of management refers to the number of subordinates who report to a particular manager. Here, the figure on top refers to a narrow span of management, and it means that a manager directly supervises only a few number of subordinates, like in this graph. So this manager has two, this manager has two, and this manager, either one has two, directly supervising a few number of managers. A wide span of management exist when a manager directly supervises a large number of employees, like here. So this manager is supervising 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So more managers. Another related topic to span of management is organizational height, which means the number of layers or levels in a management in a firm. There are two common types, flat and tall organizations. Flat organizations are organizations that have wider span of management and therefore fewer levels. They require managers to perform more administrative tasks and to spend more time supervising subordinates. Tall organizations have narrower spans of management and therefore many levels. They also incur higher administrative costs because there are more managers. Because of the multiple levels of management, internal communications may become distorted. Another structure that attempts to address issues that arise with growth, diversification, productivity, and competitiveness is the matrix structure. This structure is also called a project management structure. In this structure, the organization set up teams from different departments, thereby creating two or more intersecting lines of authority. Both vertical and horizontal lines of authority are formed. Like in this case, we have on the one hand function and on the other hand projects. Authority flows both ways, down and across. And employees on cross-functional teams report to both the project manager in charge of the team and to supervisors in terms of functions. So you can think that is a structure that is rather complex, but at the same time it provides flexibility, but it could be costly for the organization that has this structure. Another interesting structure is what is called network structure, or also called virtual organization. In this structure, the administration is the primary or core function, and the other functions are contracted or are peripheral functions outside the core in the organization. Of course, there are strengths and weaknesses. One of the strengths is that it provides flexibility to the organization because it can kind of adjust quickly to changes. However, in terms of the weaknesses, the organization, for instance, cannot control the quality of many of the other subcontractors, and also there might be low morale because there is no sense of cohesiveness in the organization and high turnover. And also there is the vulnerability of relying too much on outside contractors. Finally, while formal communications are important for organizational efficiency, informal communication has a profound impact on the effectiveness of the organization. As you might have experienced, communication occurs between friends who might be in different departments and on different levels in the organization. The most significant information communication occurs through what is called the grapevine, which is separate from the management's formal official communication channels. It is commonly represented through social networks between friends and colleagues. Here, information passed along the grapevine may relate to the job or it may not, and it might be more related to gossips, rumors, and so on. But the point here is that all this information will affect how people behave and act in the organization. Therefore, accuracy of grapevine information can be of great deal for managers. So good managers know the grapevine in the organizations. So think about, do you know the grapevine in Sawbridge? Well, this is it for chapter 7. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting below. And of course, see you in the classroom, everyone.